Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be looking at inserting your very first pivot table. So what we've done is we just got a load of data, some random data from a website called generatedata.com. Completely free to use, but it's worth going on there if you just need to get some random data. So that's where this has come from. And just obviously, if it wasn't clear already, all this data we're using is random data, so it's not anyone's actual information. So don't need to worry about any of that. Cool. So pivot tables. Main reason for using a pivot table is to summarize large sets of data. They're very particularly useful for being able to summarize it at a high level and then to be able to then drill down into the necessary parts that you require. Particularly very good if you've got numbers or any other sort of information in this where you're trying to also get totals, because it allows you to round up those totals as well. So what we're going to do is insert our very first pivot table. It's going to be very basic, this one. We'll do some more videos delving into it a bit more, but we felt rather than making one very long video, we'd break it up into smaller chunks. So for this one, we're literally going to just be inserting our very first pivot table, pivoting this information here, and just giving you a brief introduction about the pivot tables and how to use them. So when inserting a pivot table, you've got two ways you can do it. You can either highlight your data, and we'll just let you know we've got about 100 rows of data on here. So if we scroll down, you should just about see that at the bottom there. Cool. So you've got two things you can do. You can either select the whole columns that contain your data, or you can select the specific range of data that has your pivot table, or has your data in for the pivot table. The main difference is there's two ways really. The first option, if you select the whole columns like this, obviously the columns beneath the data which have got blank information are also going to get picked up into your pivot table. It's no problem. It just means that you'll probably need to exclude blank when you do filters, what we'll get to in a bit. The opposite to that is if you only selected the current size of your data, what for us is down to 100 rows, so it'd be the range A1 to D100. That works great. Obviously no problems with filtering out blank information, but obviously if your data did grow and you then suddenly had 110 rows of data, you'd have to obviously make sure that you update your pivot table range so that it's factoring in these new rows. So what we're going to do is we're going to just select the whole, just the range that contains data. And what we can do, you can either highlight your data, and we'll just quickly do that now. Scroll to the bottom, simply like this. And you can either go, and you can literally go insert and pivot table. And then what it will ask you to do is it will just confirm the range that you have selected here, and it's going to ask do you want your pivot table to be placed into either a new worksheet, or you could select this and then select a range within this existing sheet you want. But it's always useful to put it into a new worksheet to keep it separate and go OK. An alternative method to that is if you're on this sheet here, you could go insert, select pivot table, and then select your range of data, having it already identified where you want it to be placed into. But that's just two variations you can do. So you can obviously then change the location you want the pivot table to go into if you do so here. But there you go. That's either way, it's going to get you exactly the same result. So having entered your pivot table, you will be presented with this. So you'll have this box area around here, pivot table number 1, and some brief bits of information about your pivot table. If you click any of these cells around the perimeter or the outside of that, nothing's going to look any different at all. But if you click within this area, you'll notice you now have a pivot table tools available at the top here, and you've also got some information, or this panel, forget my words out, down the right hand side. And what you'll see within there is you've got each of your fields that was in your data. So we've got country, city, address, and name in our example. We then have this lower area or quadrant of 4 boxes or 4 areas, which each has a different purpose with the pivot table. So what we have here is we've got, the first one is filters. So you can filter on a particular field in your data. The next one we have to the right is columns. So what would you like to be appearing in the columns of your data? We then have rows, so what would you like to be in the rows, and then values where we can then do some sums and counts to get totals. So what we'll do, we'll start populating this in here now. So we have country, so what we'll do is we'll just bring country into filter. And you'll see that on the left hand side where you had that previous white area, it's now looking a bit more like a table. So we can see country, and we've got this drop down here. We just increase the size of our row here. Oh, yeah. We can see country in there, and then in column B it is now, you can see you've got a drop down. And for us in our example, we only have got the United Kingdom here, so that's obviously the only option that we're going to see. What we can then do is we then want to have city as one of our rows. So what we can do is we can drag city down to the bottom left hand box and let go in rows. And you'll see each one of the cities from your data. So these have obviously been grouped up. So even though these probably appeared multiple different times against each individual or whatever there is in your data, they will just show here as a distinct list, meaning that they're just, so there's no duplicates, they're only shown once. What we can then do is if we wanted to bring any more columns in, we could bring down address. And you can see that it's now got them grouped. So Birmingham has got all their addresses grouped there. And it's already expanded the field for us. But if you just do this minus button here, that will group everything back. So you've got it back at city level. And just do everything, why not? But if you want to do an individual one, you could just do Colchester. Or you could do Edinburgh as well if you wanted to there. Okay, and then what we could also do as well, we've got names here. So we could also bring names in as well. So we can now see that, well, for most of our data, it appears there's only one person in each of those addresses. But likewise, another way that we can summarize everything and to summarize at a level, or go all the way down to the lower level we have. As a quick way to hide as such and then expand each one of these, or collapse being the correct term, what we can do is we can right click, and halfway down we have the option here, we have expand and collapse. And what we can do is we can collapse entire field, and that will, all that field, what you've clicked on, will be expanded like so. And then we could do that here for Edinburgh. And the opposite we have as well is if we did a right click, we can do expand entire field, and then that field will then be completely expanded, so it will show then the next level down. But let's just then summarize that back up to city level. Perfect. So even though we've brought all of our fields into either the filter or into the rows, it doesn't mean we can't use them elsewhere. I'm just going to try and make this a bit bigger. So in value, so this is where we will be able to bring values if we want to get a summary, as in terms of a total. It could be summing data or it could be counting data. So what we can do is for any of our data, we can pull them in there. Often I will use the lowest point in this example, and we can just drag name down to this values and let go. And you can see straight away it's defaulted to a count of name. And you can see in our pivot table, it's now given us a count of the number of people in each of those locations, in each of those cities. So we can see that Birmingham has 29 people, Colchester has 15, so on and so forth, with our grand total being 100. What is spot on, because we know our rows in our data, there was 100 rows or 100 pieces of data in there. So that's obviously the perfect way that we can now start using to summarize our data. Alternatively, what we can do as well, or not alternatively, if we had numbers in here, what we will get to in another video, we could also bring numbers in and do sums, we could do averages, we have many options available to us when summarising data here in the values part. In columns, what we're able to do here is, if we wanted to, we could, rather than have city down the left, we could put city along the top. And then you can see, based on the data we have here at the moment, we've got all these are addresses in column A at the moment, and obviously if we expand then we'll get the name. And we can now see that in this address, that address aligns to Oxford. So it's really summarised all of our numbers out accordingly to where they sit. An easier way might be, or better view of that might be, if I just take city back to where it was, and rather than have country in the filter, I put country to the columns, you can have a bit better of a summary there. So we can see that everything is in the United Kingdom, and these are the cities. If we had different countries, then obviously we could do different countries along the top here. This is particularly useful if you're doing like a status report, where you could have maybe all these different cities or maybe even projects down the left hand side, and along the horizontal up here you could have the status, whether it is active, closed, deleted, so on and so forth, to give you a nice concise summary of the information. To give an example of using this filter at the top left, what we'll just do is we'll just drag city up into there. And okay, it does look a bit messy down here, messy with all these different addresses, but hopefully they prove the purpose. Having dragged city into the filters, you can now see that we have a number of options or filters available to us. So by having a filter up here, we're able to select the desired city, and it will update the pivot table to only show information for that city in this example. So we've got Birmingham, or we could go to Edinburgh, or any of the options we have. If we want to select more than just one option, all we need to do is tick this box down the bottom left here, and we can now see that we can select as many options as we require, or if we want everything, we can select the all button there, and then that will go back to there. What we can also do is then bring city back down into our rows. Sorry, it's a bit backwards and forwards here. And just because we haven't got a filter, it doesn't mean we can't filter the data. We are able to use these drop downs here for any of the fields within that row square, that bottom left one. We can do a drop down, and you can see you have a filter available here. If you have, at the moment in our current view, if you've got multiple fields in there, you can obviously access the different fields by this drop down at the top here. So you could go into address, or you could go into name, and that would update the filter you have available here for you to filter upon. So we also then have, just the last one to look at in this video, we also have some different views that we can look at here as well. So if you go into your pivot table tools at the top here, we've got, again, many different options we've got available to us here. If we just go into design, and then we can go on the left hand side here, and we can see we have things like subtotals we can play with. We've got grand totals that we can look at as well. So if we wanted to have them only on for columns and get rid of our grand total, we can do that. If we decided that actually we don't want them on for rows or columns, we can do that. So all we've got is our summary per site. We haven't got any subtotals at all. But if we want them back on again, we can turn them on for rows and columns. Also, the one we want to come into here for is report layout. So we have a few different views available to us. So at the moment, we have the first one of show in compact form. Another option we have is show in outline form. So you can see it's just slightly expanded it. So rather than all of our fields being grouped up to this single column, as we looked at before, and just go back to that just to show you. So you can see everything's in column A here. So as you expand, everything just stays in that column A there. By doing the outline form, you can see that it's now spread out. So each field has its own dedicated column, what makes it easier for filtering. As you can see, we've now got those filters available to us. And obviously when you expand, the various information will populate into their suitable fields. The other and last view we have available is a favourite of mine, what I often use, and that is tabular form. So you can see it just changes the format again ever so slightly. So if I go back to outline form, you can see you have this subtotal line here for the Colchester, what you've got available there. If you go into the tabular form, it changes ever so slightly, but it just means that, oh, can I not get back to it? Outline form, and then we'll go into tabular form. There we go. So you can see that subtotal row has now gone. But what we do have, it's not gone completely, it's just removed from the top. What happens is the subtotal goes down to here. So you'll see it there for Colchester, so it's in line 22. So I'll just summarise everything for Colchester. If you collapse the field, then it just shows it in this single level here. Else when you expand, it moves down to the bottom there. If you want to remove any of the subtotals, all you need to do is right click, and you can see this option here for subtotal city. Deselect that, and you can see that subtotal goes. But it doesn't mean, but you don't lose it at this level here. You still have it available to you. It's just when you're expanding where we have that subtotal there. Okay, we think that gets to a good point of introducing you to pivot tables. So what we suggest doing is In the description to this video, you will find this exact workbook that we've been using here. Jump on in there, have a play around and see what you think. Maybe even try either deleting this pivot table or just opening a new sheet and trying to create a pivot table again from our pivot table data. And let us know how you get on. If you've got any questions, drop us a comment in below this video, or in the description to this video, along with the link for downloading the file, you'll also find a link to our website and our Facebook page. So reach out to us there if you'd rather, if you have any questions at all. And if not, we hope you enjoyed the video. Please give the video a like. As always, do give the channel a subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you in the next video. Thank you.